Continue our series on Sega Shinobi franchise, here's Shadow Dancer. This could be the third entry in the mainline series or not. I'm honestly not sure because in the title screen they omit the Secret of Shinobi title. This takes place after Revenge of Shinobi, in 1997 to be exact, so if you wanted to know what was going on in New York during 1997, you can read the intro. But that would require you to make sense of it, which is impossible. That's because this game has some of the worst official localizations ever for a Mega Drive game. They confuse the main protagonist, Hayate Musashi, son of Joe Musashi, with Joe Musashi himself. And they don't even call him by the right name, they think he's literally called Shinobi. Yeah, if you want to call him John Shinobi, well, there you go. And to add to the comedy of the bad translation, if you take the intro at face value, you get the impression you're going to be fighting a giant lizard monster that's attacking and infecting people. Slowly and quietly. Yeah, right, I'm sure a colossal monster will move really freaking quietly. In actuality, Hayate is fighting against a new evil organization called Union Lizard. I can see how a translator would mistake that for Godzilla doing stealth kills around New York. Anyway, the gameplay is much closer to the original Shinobi arcade game when compared to Revenge of Shinobi. You have a limited shuriken, and when enemies are close enough, you do a melee attack. Oh, and one hit and you're dead, no health bar this time. If you're able to pull it off without being killed or bounce back first, you can even do a flying kick if you do a melee attack mid-air. You're once again dealing with enemies who try to run and stab you, ninjas that appear when you move close to their spawn point, and gunmen who carry pistols that can only load 3 bullets. You have to rescue all hostages before you go to the exit. Some hostages power up your attack. The time limit is also back, but you're still supposed to be slow and methodical about your movements across the levels. Until you memorize where all enemies are and where more enemies might spawn from, you can't try to rush things or play like a traditional side-scrolling action game, or you're going to die over and over. Well, you will die often anyway, since this is still a Shinobi game. It's a bit on the easy side for the series standards though. That doesn't mean it's an easy game for newcomers, but for Shinobi veterans who played a lot of the original or Revenge, reaching the boss in each round will be a breeze. I didn't lose any continue until the second boss in my first playthrough, and I barely lost any lives in the actual levels. You can increase the difficulty of course. I couldn't tell many of the changes from the default difficulty to the second one, but the hardest difficulty does get very challenging. Or maybe it's simply frustrating, because the game adds gunmen in pairs or trios nearly everywhere, and personally I think that's a bit on the cheap side. No, if you want an actual fair difficulty ramp up, just try setting to non-shuriken mode. In this mode, your only form of attacking the levels is using your kicks and sword slashes. I guess they couldn't adapt the boss fights for this mode, so still use shuriken to fight them. And that's okay, because the boss fights might be the hardest of the 16-bit Shinobi games, in my opinion. Your ninja magic or ninjutsu works like in the first game. You don't get to choose which one to use, it's always a specific spell for each level and each boss. They're essentially all screen clearing attacks that you can use once per level. If you don't use them, you get bonus points. And just like in the first Shinobi, if you kill every enemy without using your shuriken, you get a ton of extra points. That makes the non-shuriken mode the fastest way to rack up points. The exclusive new feature in this game is the dog. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of crap for saying this, but I really don't like the dog. He's constantly barking over the music if enemies show up on screen. He doesn't do anything unless you manually tell him to charge at someone. The charge attack is clunky to use. Sometimes it doesn't register, and sometimes the dog doesn't charge. You're supposed to do a complete standstill and be sure the dog isn't hopping up or off a platform. Hold the attack button for a full second as the gauge flashes, then let go of it. This wouldn't be so bad if you could attack enemies more often. Most enemies would just damage him if you try. The gunmen are the only safe bet, as he's not damaged by their bullet. And if you have the perfect timing figured out, you can have him dash at the Riger looking guys when they are unprotected. But like I said, I just think it's too clunky to be worth the risk. The charge attack is supposed to be useful. It makes the dog keep the enemy from attacking and become completely vulnerable to you. But most of the time it's more efficient to just use your shuriken thanks to how clunky and slow the charge mechanic is. Now if you're playing the non-shuriken mode, the dog becomes 10 times more important. No shuriken to save your butt means you absolutely need the dog's help to deal with many of the gunman enemies. In fact, if you want Shadow Dancer to have a more unique spice compared to the other games in this series, I highly recommend playing with this mode turned on. It's much more challenging, but it's also more fun. At least if you don't change it to level 3 difficulty. Either way, I wish the dog didn't bark so much. I don't remember most of the music tracks in this game and I blame him for it. Bonus stages where you shoot a bunch of enemy ninjas are back. I found this better and more fun than the first person ninja shooting minigame in the original Shinobi. It doesn't end if you fail to shoot any ninja and aiming isn't as bad. But it's still not easy to get enough points for the extra lives you rewarded. Unless you decide to move to the left wall and mash the shuriken button with your brain turned off. Then you're guaranteed to get a perfect score every time. That's 3 extra lives per bonus and you need those lives for the final boss. Despite coming out the following year after the Revenge of Shinobi, this game feels like a downgrade on a technical level. The graphics look worse. I wasn't sure what to make of the music until I listened to it in the sound test, because I had trouble paying attention to it with the dog barking. Is it as good as the soundtrack in Shinobi 1 and Revenge? I would say no, but what is here is still good. The levels aren't any shorter than the levels in the first Shinobi game, yet they feel like half the length somehow. There is more verticality across the board, which helps elevate the level design here by a notch at least. You know, I thought I'd have more to say about this game, but the best compliment I can give to it is that it's a Sega developed Shinobi game, which automatically makes it a decent game. And the setting in the series is always a cool one to revisit, especially if you care at all for the late 80s or early 90s type of scenarios. It's a pretty average Shinobi game, and not the first one I'd recommend for someone who wanted to check the series out. It lacks the spectacle of the Revenge of Shinobi, and it lacks the pacing and flow of the first. But you could do much worse, at least it's better than all the 8-bit entries. If you do pick this as your first Shinobi game, you will probably have a good time regardless. If you don't hate arcade-style action games, that is. Aside from Mega Drive or Genesis cards, the game is included in the Sega Genesis Classics collection. But if you can't get that one physically, you are screwed because Sega delisted it from online stores. Sega! There's also a PlayStation 2 Genesis collection with Shadow Dancer in it if you prefer that. Just be warned, the demolition experience will be fairly subpar in either of those two collections. And sadly, this game was not remastered or re-released by M2 in any shape or form, not even on Genesis Online. Short review, but that's all I have to say about Shadow Dancer, the secret of Joe Shinobi. If you want to tell me how much of an idiot I am for not being impressed or how much I suck for not understanding the full appeal of the game, make sure to leave a comment, or just share any thoughts you might have about Shadow Dancer or the Shinobi games. As always, thanks for watching Game Over Hell, take care.